Someone is 10 minutes late. They haven't texted. Within seconds, you aren't just wondering where they are. You are visualizing the car crash. You are imagining the hospital waiting room. You are mentally planning the funeral. People call you dramatic or pessimistic. But clinical psychology has a different name for this involuntary mental movie. It is called catastrophizing. And it is not a flaw in your personality. It is a highly evolved, hyper-vigilant defense mechanism. Your brain is generating worst-case scenarios to prevent you from being blindsided. By the end of this, you will see why this exhausting habit actually makes you uniquely equipped for crisis. But first, we need to talk about why your mind forces you to watch these horrors. This isn't ordinary pessimism. Pessimism is thinking that things might go wrong. What you are experiencing is an involuntary simulation. Your brain is not just having a passing negative thought. It is projecting a high-definition movie complete with physiological responses. Your heart rate spikes. Your stomach ties itself in knots. Your breathing becomes shallow. You are reacting to a tragedy that has not happened and might never happen, as if it is unfolding right in front of you. Society tells you to just relax. But trying to relax when your internal alarm bells are deafening is biologically impossible. Your body is reacting to a perceived threat. If you want to understand why your mind does this, and how to stop being held hostage by your own imagination, you need to join the tribe of people who think like this. Hit subscribe. We don't do generic advice here. We decode the unique wiring of minds built for depth, not for the average. To understand your future dread, we have to look at the exact structures in your brain that are prioritizing speed over accuracy. The culprit behind your mental movies is a tiny, almond-shaped cluster of neurons deep inside your temporal lobe, the amygdala. It is your brain's primary threat detection center. The amygdala does not care about being rational. It cares about keeping you alive. In the world of clinical psychology, catastrophizing often shows up most intensely in people with generalized anxiety disorder, health anxiety, or attachment anxiety. If a partner is late, the attachment anxiety whispers that they are abandoning you. If you have a history of unpredictable trauma, where bad things out of nowhere actually did happen, your brain learns a very specific lesson. It learns that peace is just the fragile glass covering an inevitable disaster. So, it shatters the glass itself. Your mind interprets a small, ambiguous cue as undeniable evidence for the absolute worst explanation. A missed text is not a dead battery. It is a fatal accident. Someone sounding slightly off on the phone is not fatigue. It is hidden anger and imminent rejection. Your threat system seizes on these tiny fragments of uncertainty. Once it does, it starts building out rich, terrifying scenes. Breakups, job losses, evictions, funerals. The architecture of your dread is meticulously detailed. This happens because your amygdala triggers a fear response before your prefrontal cortex, the logical part of your brain, has had time to weigh the variables. This sequence is widely known as an amygdala hijack. While not a formal diagnostic term, it perfectly describes the mechanics of your panic. The amygdala and its related neurostructures are continually scanning your environment for survival and social threats. When they spot one, they bypass the slower, rational processing pathways. They pump stress hormones into your bloodstream instantly. By the time your logical prefrontal cortex comes online to suggest mundane alternatives like traffic or a long line at the coffee shop, the chemical alarm has already been pulled. The fear is in your blood. Once the amygdala hijack is underway, it exerts a magnetic pull on your attention. It pushes all your cognitive focus toward danger. This makes it incredibly easy to notice every single detail that supports your worst-case scenario, and almost impossible to consider mundane, safe alternatives. Confirmation bias takes over. You see the clock strike 10 minutes past the hour. Your threat system, primed by past anxieties, flags the word late as critically dangerous. It immediately starts generating violent, tragic imagery. It does this to force you to pay attention, to make you brace for impact. Your logical mind might try to intervene. A quiet voice in the back of your head might whisper that this is probably nothing. But that rational voice is arriving at the scene after the alarm bells are already deafening. The physiological cascade has started. Your brain is treating the simulation as reality. And there is a very specific, deeply ingrained reason why your mind insists on traumatizing you with these mental movies. It has to do with a psychological concept known as pre-emptive grief. Your catastrophizing is not a sign of a broken mind. It is a protective strategy that has simply gone too far. Pre-emptive grief rests on a series of unconscious beliefs. Your brain believes that if you imagine the absolute worst outcome right now, you will somehow be insulated from the shock and devastation later. It tells you that if you rehearse the loss, maybe it will hurt less when it actually arrives. It tries to convince you that constantly analysing everything that could possibly go wrong will give you the power to prevent it. Your mind hates vulnerability. It despises the feeling of being blindsided. So, it uses anxiety as a heavy, exhausting emotional armour. The logic of this emotional armour is simple. If I never let myself fully relax, then nothing can surprise me. If I am already living in the wreckage of the worst-case scenario, then reality cannot hurt me more than my own imagination already has. But in reality, this strategy fails drastically. Imagining the worst does not immunize you from the pain of a real tragedy. Rehearsing a disaster does not soften the blow if the disaster strikes. All it actually does is guarantee that you suffer twice. You suffer once in your vivid, terrifying fantasy, and you suffer again in reality. And most of the time, the disaster never even happens. This means you are enduring the agonizing pain of grief, loss, and panic for absolutely no reason. Chronic rehearsal of disasters keeps your nervous system trapped in a state of anticipatory stress. This artificially elevates your baseline anxiety. It destroys your sleep architecture. It creates a host of physical symptoms, from muscle tension to gastrointestinal distress. You are paying a massive biological tax for an event that only exists inside your own head. And worse, this creates a vicious, self-reinforcing psychological loop. The loop works like this. The more you catastrophize, the more anxious and hyper-vigilant you become. Your brain adapts to this constant state of high alert by becoming even more sensitive to potential threats. The more vigilant you are, the more danger you start to perceive in entirely harmless, ambiguous cues. A slightly unenthusiastic text message suddenly looks like a declaration of war. A random ache in your side becomes a terminal diagnosis. Your threat system becomes hypersensitized. But to truly understand this loop, we have to look at why your mental simulations are so incredibly vivid. The brain systems involved in catastrophizing are not operating in isolation. They heavily overlap with three major cognitive networks. The first is autobiographical memory, the system responsible for remembering your own past experiences. The second is episodic future thinking, the mental machinery used to imagine specific future events. The third is social cognition, your ability to imagine how others feel, react, and behave. When these networks are highly developed, strong, and deeply interconnected, the result is both a blessing and a terrible curse for your daily peace of mind. Because these networks are so strong, you do not just have abstract worries. You get highly detailed, sensory-rich mental movies of exactly what might happen. Your emotional responses match the imagined scene perfectly, completely ignoring your current physical reality. This is why anxious people with high levels of imagination and intelligence often suffer profoundly. Your mental simulations are broadcast in high definition. Your body does not possess a mechanism to fully distinguish between a vividly imagined trauma and a real-world event. Cortisol is released either way. Every time you run one of these catastrophic simulations, you are bathing your brain in stress hormones. You are conditioning your cortisol release. But here is the pivot. Here is where the narrative shifts from validation of your pain to the revelation of your unique power. The world looks at your catastrophizing and calls it a disorder. They tell you to stop overthinking. They tell you to just be positive. But neuroscience and evolutionary biology see something entirely different. The exact same circuitry that torments you at 2 in the morning has genuine, world-class advantages. The truth is, when harnessed correctly, this hyperactive threat detection system makes you formidable. You are likely exceptionally good at seeing vulnerabilities in plans, processes, and systems. While everyone else is blindly optimistic about a project or a trip, your mind is naturally generating complex, "how could this fail" scenarios. You are not being a killjoy. You are running predictive modeling. You are the person who remembers the backup charges. You remember the insurance details. You know where the emergency exits are. You foresee the supply chain collapse before it happens. People like you are natural contingency planners. Your brain automatically builds, if this happens, then we will execute that algorithms. You spot early warning signs and micro-expressions that others completely miss. Why? Because their brains have not been ruthlessly trained to look at the edges of reality. They do not scan for failure modes. You do. In actual emergencies, while the optimists are paralyzed by the sudden shock of reality breaking down, you often experience a strange, cold calmness. You take charge. You know exactly what to do when the world falls apart. You are not fearless in these moments. The calmness comes from familiarity. You have already rehearsed this crisis, or one very much like it, 1,000 times in your head. You have the mental scripts fully prepared. While others are experiencing the paralysis of being blindsided, you are simply executing a plan you finalized months ago during a restless night. In this sense, your future dread makes you an excellent risk mitigator. You are a natural strategist. You are a highly capable crisis operator. Your brain is a supercomputer dedicated to keeping people safe. The problem is not that you possess this supercomputer. The problem is that you leave the machine running on maximum power when you are just trying to sit on the couch and wait for a friend to arrive. You are using a military-grade radar system to track a paper airplane. And because society does not understand how this mechanism works, they offer you the worst possible advice. They tell you to just think positive. They hand you empty platitudes. Everything happens for a reason. Do not worry, it will all be fine. But attempts to force positive thoughts almost always backfire. When you try to force blanket optimism onto a highly active threat system, your brain actively rebels. The amygdala interprets this forced positivity as you dangerously ignoring a very real threat. It thinks you have fallen asleep at the wheel. So, what does it do? It ramps up the anxiety even higher to shock you back into a state of vigilance. It screams louder to get your attention back. Furthermore, telling yourself that nothing bad will ever happen feels deeply dishonest, especially if your personal history includes sudden losses, trauma, or unexpected shocks. Your brain is far too smart to be convinced by generic, toxic positivity. It looks at the world and knows that bad things absolutely can and do happen. It rejects your fake optimism as a lie. What your brain actually craves is not reassurance that nothing will go wrong. It craves specific, actionable contingency plans. It wants to know that if the worst does happen, you have the resources to survive it. This is why you must learn the critical difference between productive planning and destructive rumination. They feel similar, but their neurological impacts are entirely opposite. Productive planning has a definite endpoint. It sounds like this. If they are in a minor accident, I have their location tracked, I will call their insurance, and I will drive to this specific hospital. That is a plan. It is bounded, logical, and finite. Rumination, on the other hand, is an infinite loop. It is running the vivid, agonizing movie of the hospital waiting room and the funeral over and over again without generating any new solutions. Planning decreases cortisol because the brain feels prepared. Rumination spikes cortisol because the brain feels perpetually trapped. The goal is to gently redirect your brain from replaying the terrifying movie to grounding itself in the present moment, but only after a realistic plan is put in place. You do not have to lie to your brain. You simply have to reassure your amygdala that you have done everything within your power, and the rest is dictated by physics and chance. You must separate what you can control from the infinite void of what you cannot. Acknowledge that bad things can happen, but refuse to give those phantom timelines 100% of your current mental airtime. This requires a profound reframing of your own identity. You are not a broken, negative person. You are not fundamentally damaged. It is time to replace the narrative that society has forced upon you with the clinical truth. Say this to yourself. My threat system is highly sensitive to unpredictability. My imagination is exceptionally powerful, and it automatically generates worst-case simulations to protect me. My brain mistakenly believes that rehearsing disasters is the only way to protect my heart from being blindsided. These are facts of your neurology, not moral failings. But you must also integrate the positive truths of your wiring. Say this. I am unusually gifted at seeing risk and preparing for it. In real crises, I possess mental templates that others completely lack, because I have willingly walked through the fire in my own mind. I am the shield for the people I care about. You are not living in the worst-case scenario because you secretly enjoy the misery. You are living there because a deep, primal part of your nervous system believes that the darkest timeline is the absolute safest place to be emotionally. Let us dig deeper into why unpredictability is such a massive trigger for your system. For many people who catastrophize, this mechanism was installed during childhood or early developmental stages. If you grew up in an environment that was emotionally volatile, inconsistent, or chaotic, your brain had to adapt to survive. Unpredictability was not just annoying, it was dangerous. You learned that sudden shifts in tone, delayed arrivals, or mysterious silences were the immediate precursors to conflict or pain. Your brain mapped ambiguity directly to danger. Neuroscience refers to this as conditioned threat response. Your nervous system was programmed to eliminate surprise. Surprise meant you were caught off guard. Surprise meant you were vulnerable. So, you developed this magnificent, exhausting superpower of hyper-vigilance. You became a master at reading the room before you even walked through the door. You learned to analyze the micro-fluctuations in a loved one's vocal tone. You traded your internal peace for a highly advanced early warning system. You sacrificed the present moment to secure the future. This explains the concept of sensory gating. Sensory gating is a neurological process that filters out redundant or unnecessary stimuli from the brain. In a neurotypical brain, a 10-minute delay is filtered out as irrelevant noise. The gate stays closed. But in a highly vigilant brain, the sensory gate is blown wide open. Your brain flags that 10-minute delay as critical survival data. It floods your prefrontal cortex with urgent alerts. You are processing a magnitude of threat data that the average person simply ignores. No wonder you are completely exhausted by noon. And this exhaustion leads to a depletion of your dopamine sensitivity. When you are constantly simulating grief, loss, and panic, your brain's reward centers become suppressed. The sheer volume of cortisol and adrenaline flooding your system leaves very little room for dopamine and serotonin to bind effectively. Joy becomes something that feels inherently unsafe. Have you ever noticed that the moment you feel genuinely happy or deeply relaxed, a sudden wave of dread washes over you? That is your amygdala noticing your guard is down and violently pulling the alarm. Your brain literally views happiness as a vulnerability. It whispers, if you are happy, you are not paying attention. If you are not paying attention, the disaster will strike. This phenomenon is known as foreboding joy. You quickly extinguish your own happiness by manufacturing a catastrophic thought simply to return to a baseline of optimal arousal. For your threat system, optimal arousal means being slightly stressed, heavily armored, and relentlessly observant. Calmness feels like walking into a battlefield without a shield. Stress feels like safety. This is the paradox that the average world refuses to understand. The world tells you that anxiety is the opposite of safety. But for you, anticipatory anxiety is the very mechanism of your perceived safety. To let go of the catastrophizing feels like throwing away your only weapon in a dark forest. So, if we cannot force positivity, and we cannot simply demand that you drop your shield, what is the clinical solution? How do we stop the suffering without leaving you feeling utterly exposed and vulnerable to the chaos of the world? The work is not to amputate this brilliant part of your mind. The goal is to dial it down from a relentless automatic compulsion into a targeted, controlled utility. You must learn to distinguish between the moments when your threat simulations are genuinely useful and the moments when they are just harvesting your energy without providing any real protection. This is where we implement structured, time-boxed risk planning. This is the exact technique used by high-level operators, from chess grandmasters to elite emergency responders, to manage catastrophic scenarios. Time-boxed risk planning operates on a very strict neurological boundary. When the ambiguous trigger occurs and the catastrophic movie begins to play, you do not try to suppress the thought. Suppression only makes the amygdala fight harder. Instead, you look at a clock and give yourself exactly 3 minutes to engage with the worst-case scenario. You let the monster into the room, but you force it to sit at the table. You ask yourself, what is the specific operational failure here? What is the tangible, real-world step I would take if this nightmare actually occurred? During these 3 minutes, you map out the absolute worst that could happen. You draft the contingency plan. You name the hospital. You identify the backup fund. You establish the exact sequence of actions you would take to survive the wreckage. You give your amygdala exactly what it wants: a survival protocol. But when those 3 minutes are up, the boundary snaps shut. You have extracted the tactical value from the simulation. You have built the plan. Now, any further rumination is explicitly categorized by your logical brain as useless emotional bleeding. When the intrusive image tries to loop back in minute 4, you deploy a cognitive interrupt. You literally speak to your threat system. You say, out loud if possible, "We have already mapped this failure. The plan is logged. We are returning to the present." This sounds incredibly simplistic, but neurologically it is profound. By vocalizing the interrupt, You are engaging the motor cortex and the language centers in your frontal lobe, forcing blood flow away from the hyperactive amygdala and back into the regions of the brain responsible for executive control. You are reminding your biology that preparation has already occurred. You are separating the brilliant strategist inside you from the terrified child. You are proving to your nervous system that you can be prepared for the worst without having to emotionally live in the wreckage 24 hours a day. Over time, this practice physically rewires your neural pathways. The synaptic strength between the ambiguous cue and the catastrophic panic response begins to weaken. The brain learns that it can hold the shield without having to constantly swing the sword. Let us talk about the physiological debt you accumulate from these involuntary simulations. Every single time your brain projects a catastrophic movie, your sympathetic nervous system activates the fight or flight cascade. Your adrenal glands dump epinephrine into your bloodstream. Your liver releases extra glucose to give your muscles the energy to either fight an attacker or run for your life. But you are not running. You are just sitting in your car, staring at your phone, waiting for a text message. That massive surge of kinetic energy has nowhere to go. Because the biological energy cannot be burned off through physical action, it turns inward. It becomes a corrosive force. It manifests as a trembling in your hands, a restless bouncing of your leg, or a sudden, unexplained wave of nausea. Your muscles, particularly in your neck, jaw, and shoulders, clench violently in preparation for an impact that never comes. This is why you wake up the next morning feeling as though you have run a marathon, despite having slept for 8 hours. Your mind was asleep, but your nervous system was fighting a phantom war all night. To combat this, you must learn the neurological principle of somatic discharge. When the amygdala hijack occurs and the dread sets in, cognitive logic is often not enough to break the spell. You cannot always think your way out of a physiological trap. You have to move your way out. You have to signal to your primitive brain that the perceived threat has been evaded and the danger has passed. This requires a deliberate physical intervention to burn off the excess cortisol and reset your vagus nerve. You must complete the biological stress cycle. Completing the stress cycle can be as simple as standing up and engaging in 2 minutes of intense rhythmic movement. It can be a deep, diaphragmatic breathing technique, like a physiological sigh. 2 sharp inhales through the nose, followed by a long, slow exhale through the mouth. This specific breathing pattern actively forces the diaphragm to expand and signals the parasympathetic nervous system to apply the brakes on your heart rate. You are literally using your respiratory system to manually hack into your brainstem and shut off the internal alarm bells. When you combine this somatic discharge with the time-boxed risk planning we discussed earlier, you create an impenetrable defense against catastrophic rumination. You give your mind the tactical plan it craves, and you give your body the physical release it desperately needs. You bridge the gap between your brilliant intellect and your primal biology. This is the ultimate form of self-mastery. You stop being the victim of your powerful imagination, and you start acting as its director. You take the script back from the fear centers of your brilliant brain. This brings us to a critical realization about your capacity for empathy. Because your brain spends so much time in the realm of episodic future thinking and social cognition, you possess a terrifyingly accurate map of human pain. You know exactly what devastation looks like because you have toured it in your mind 1,000 times. This makes you uniquely equipped to hold space for others when their worlds actually fall apart. When someone you love experiences a tragedy, you do not flinch. You do not offer empty platitudes. You know the exact architecture of their grief. While the optimists run away from the heaviness of a real tragedy because they simply cannot process the darkness, you step forward. You know how to sit in the dark with people. You know that they do not need to be fixed, they just need to not be alone. Your anticipatory anxiety, when transmuted, becomes the deepest form of human empathy. You are the person who organises the meals, handles the logistics, and stands steady in the storm. The very same mental machinery that causes your midnight dread is the machinery that makes you the anchor for your entire community. Do not let a society obsessed with shallow, relentless positivity convince you that your depth is a disease. The world is built for the average. It is built for people who move through life completely oblivious to the fragility of the systems holding it all together. You are not built for the average. You are built for depth. You are wired to see the cracks in the foundation. You are a sentinel. And yes, being the sentinel is an incredibly heavy burden to bear. Watching the horizon for storms that no one else believes are coming is a lonely, exhausting existence. But the world desperately needs its sentinels. Every great expedition, every secure fortress, every enduring society relied on the people who asked, "What if this completely fails?" Your catastrophic thinking is the evolutionary shadow of visionary foresight. The architects who build the strongest bridges are the ones who spend their nights visualizing exactly how the wind and the weight will try to tear those bridges down. You are an architect of survival. You just need to learn how to leave the blueprints at the office so you can actually enjoy the life you are protecting. This journey is not about becoming a careless, blindly optimistic person. That person does not exist inside you, and trying to become them will only fracture your identity. The journey is about reclaiming your sovereignty over your own imagination. It is about recognizing that your mind is a breathtakingly powerful simulation engine, and you have accidentally left it running on the default settings of terror and grief. You have the power to step into the control room. You can acknowledge the alarm, log the threat, and then firmly pull the emergency brake. When you finally do this, something beautiful happens. The crushing weight in your chest begins to dissolve, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started trusting your own competence. You begin to realize that you are strong enough to handle the disaster when it actually arrives, which means you no longer need to exhaust yourself fighting its ghost today. You have survived every single bad day you have ever faced. Your track record for survival is exactly 100%. Your brain just needs to be reminded of its own formidable resilience. So the next time someone is 10 minutes late and the dark movie begins to play in your mind, I want you to pause. I want you to feel the adrenaline spike, notice the tension in your jaw, and recognize exactly what is happening. Say to yourself, "Ah, there is the amygdala. There is my loyal, hyperactive guard dog, barking at the shadows to keep me safe." Do not judge the dog. Do not hate the dog. Just calmly acknowledge it, pat it on the head, and say, "I see the possibility of danger, but we are standing down. We have the skills to handle whatever walks through that door." You are learning to wield your mind like a precision instrument. The future dread, which used to be a paralyzing shield of anticipatory grief, transforms into a quiet, calculated radar. You see the risks. You prepare the contingencies. You protect the people you love, but you refuse to bleed before you are actually cut. You refuse to mourn before the loss actually occurs. You step out of the chaotic wreckage of the worst-case scenario and you plant your feet firmly in the absolute safety of the present moment. You are not broken. You are ready. This is how you master the future dread. You do not conquer it by ignoring the darkness. You conquer it by becoming utterly confident in your ability to navigate it. You are not broken. You have never been broken. You are intricately, magnificently wired for a world that requires deep thinkers and fierce protectors. The anxiety you feel is just the raw, unrefined energy of your own brilliance, waiting to be directed. If this resonated with you, if you finally feel seen without being judged, hit subscribe, join the community, discover more about your unique wiring. And that is exactly what we do here on Tom Talks Mind. We do not pathologize your brilliance. We do not shame you for the ways your brain has learned to survive in a chaotic world. We decode the science of your soul. We validate the heavy burdens you carry. And we give you the tools to forge them into weapons of unimaginable strength. If you are tired of the shallow advice, if you are ready to master your unique neurology, subscribe to the channel. Welcome to the tribe. Your mind is a magnificent machine. Let us learn how to drive it.